This is the Andrew Walsh podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen. I really appreciate it. I'm praying you can take away something from this episode that brings value to your life. Make sure to subscribe to my podcast to stay up to date with the latest episodes, and please share with a friend if you feel you're getting something out of these episodes. You can also follow me on Instagram at @A_Walsh. Let's fire it off. All right, what's going on, everybody? We got a legend in the house today. We got Mr. Andy Carlson straight off a plane from Iceland here joining us on the podcast. What's good, Andy?
Oh, man, happy to be here. Just trying to match the positivity and the energy of Mr. Walsh as always.
Oh my gosh, brother. Well, it's awesome to have you join. I know everybody who's listening is going to take something away from this podcast. So enough diddly daddling. We're going to get into it. Let's just say a quick prayer though. And for those of you who are new to the Andrew Walsh podcast, I always say a prayer for not only God to guide me and Andy, but also for you. So if you're religious or not religious, you're just going to get some blessings from Andy and I right now. So Father God, we come to you on this beautiful day. We got breath to breathe. We got air in our lungs. Our heart is beating. We woke up today. This is the best day of our lives, God. No matter what else is going around us, we're here today, God. We only are promised these 24 hours, and we're thankful for it. We thank Andy for his time. He's so busy with work and acting that he's going to be able to come onto this podcast and shed some knowledge to help not only myself, but everyone who listens. God, we pray for the listeners of this podcast episode today, that you bless them with increase, good health, happiness, laughter, favor, abundance, less stress, more relaxation time, more travel time, more time spent with quality significant others and family. God, we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, so let's go. Give our audience who maybe has never met you before. I know we went to Cal Poly Slow together. Tell them a little about you and what you do, Andy.
Yeah, born in the Bay Area, so I'm Oakland born and raised. Ventured down to Cal Poly for school, went back to the Bay Area for work, and then found my passion in acting, which took me back down to Southern California. And now balancing pretty much both, which, I think one job in this world's already enough, but two adds definitely another layer to it. And I know that in addition to our passions that you and I both, share, we also have a big passion for family, friends, our personal health, well-being, and all the above. So staying busy as always. But yeah.
Man, I think a lot of people who listen and tune into this podcast can resonate with what you're saying. Maybe you don't have two jobs or careers, but we have family, we have relationships, we have our health. I mean, we all only have the same 24 hours, and it can seem like a lot, especially you and I, we're adulting. I mean, you're planning a wedding and stuff like that. I mean, it's stressful. And I actually really wanted Andy on this podcast, everybody who's listening, because maybe a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or something, he shot me a text and he's like, Walsh, do you ever deal with anxiety? And it was great because honestly, nobody's really ever asked me that before. And I feel like too, mental health is so popular right now and people are having conversations. And I think it'd be great to normalize it a little bit and share some stories, Andy and myself being a little vulnerable, opening up, and then maybe talking through some things that we found have helped. And just so that people don't feel alone or like, man, am I the only person who has these thoughts or these feelings? Because I feel like that's hard, and you're not alone. So Andy, give me a little context behind that text.
Yeah. It's funny. I personally have never really experienced or did not experience anxiety for a majority of my life. I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed. And as we get older, I think you get on more responsibility, and those things can kind of, I think, compile up, and it's usually subconsciously. And I think part of what happened too is right when you get into acting, like a lot more of your life becomes more public, more visible, and I think for a lot of us, right, like you and I, we love having we love how we make people feel. We like to put people, smile on their
Yeah.
faces, and you can kind of control that based on, how you display yourself. And I think in today's world where, social media and all these different things, people can kind of define their own interpretations. And I'm not saying I'm being seen in any negative light. I think it's just, it's one of those things that becomes more sensitive. But on top of that, I think just with the daily responsibilities that build up, and of course, as you mentioned, the wedding, and of course, the state of the world and our economy, right? Like, there's just a lot of things going on, and
Yeah.
as you mentioned, it's not really normalized. And again, because it was new to me, I've never really had to figure out like outlets or methods. And so what I kind of figured was like, what's interesting is, uh, why not go to one of the most positive, energetic, outgoing people I know, and kind of see either, one, maybe you've done the same thing kind of personally behind the scenes, that you figured out, kind of how to address it. Maybe you just to haven't experienced it yourself, and that's honestly probably a good thing too, because then that means you've figured out a way subconsciously to avoid it. And so that's kind of what spurred this whole thing.
Yeah.
Was kind of my first sense, self-realization of like, whoa, I'm going through something, and it's new. And I think, again, the reason I reached out is because I think what you and I are great at being at is resourceful. And I think a lot of people, from what I've seen and read and experienced personally, is like you almost feel like you're alone, and you want to actually get more and more kind of
Isolated.
huddled and
Yeah.
isolated, when in reality, like, the solutions are actually out beyond, by interacting with people and reading about it and listening about it and hearing how other people are actually going about it. And that's, I'm sure we'll talk about it shortly, but like, that's really the long context behind that short text.
No, that's awesome for sharing. And I think that's what makes your story so like relatable. I feel like maybe is the word for a lot of people, because you are a very positive person. You do pour a lot of good energy into people, and it hit you. And it's not
Yeah.
like maybe this is something you've had
No
your
one's
whole
safe.
life, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like same for me. And I feel like no one's really, like, I guess, immune to it. It can hit anyone at any
Exactly.
time. And like, I even know, like, I think maybe a physical symptom, I don't know if you can relate to it, but I felt like I've had it where, like, maybe two different times where I actually felt like my chest was
Yes.
like kind of like, imagine like a cave, or like in those movies where the walls are coming in, and it was like around
Hmm.
my heart, and I just felt like,
Yeah.
whoa, bro, this is a lot right now, whether
Yeah.
it's like work and I never had that feeling before. And it is kind of like, even
Yeah.
talking about it, I'm just getting a little sweaty palms. It's like, I don't want to ever
uh,
go back there. But
yeah. Yeah.
did you ever experience any, like, physically,
Oh,
or like
that was well,
shaking or anything?
that was the indicator for me, actually. It was like the external physical pieces of it. I was like,
Hmm.
whoa, like, you know, I'm reliving it. It's as you mentioned, it's your chest. It's like kind of feeling like you struggle to take that deep breath that used to be so easy. Um, and yeah, so I think there's a lot of subconscious stuff, again, just piling up and figuring out, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'll figure this out, I'll figure that out. And then all of a sudden it's like your body is now actually weighing on itself. And that's where, you know, you do have to be like, okay, I got to address something here. What's going on?
Yeah. And I think a lot of external circumstances and situations can create a lot of internal turmoil, right?
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with a job, or we get an email and it's like, oh gosh. And then we start to internalize a lot of this. So
Hmm.
let's get into maybe some practical applications of this. Cause you said, Andy, a moment ago, like, you kind of want to isolate, and you kind of want to maybe stay in, like social anxiety too. Like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to talk about this.
Hmm.
Um, why do you think you reached out? And what do you think is a benefit of maybe sharing or talking about it? Does it make it not, you're not
Hmm.
as afraid of it? Or what do you think?
That's a great question. I think I think part of it is, again, I think you and I have had the luxury of not feeling alone. Like we've got great circles that
Yeah.
we've developed from our hometowns, from Cal Poly, et cetera. Um, and so, I think one thing for me was like, all right, this is new. Let's build a new circle. Um, and and that's where again, like reaching out to you was part of that. Because I mean, you hear, you see people every day talking about like Headspace and all these other apps that are really comforting and helpful. You hear about people starting to go to therapy more. You hear about other people that have had it. And what happens to you, it's kind of like, I think you just got to kind of figure out what works best. And again, because it was such a new area, and when I was kind of isolated, I was Googling a lot. I was thinking of
Mm.
like my idols, and I was like, I said their name, anxiety, and like the amount of things that pop up. It's like part of it's like just refreshing. I think it's like all these different levels of what is it, depression, where like there's like acceptance, or no, it's not depression, it's like
Grief.
loss or grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's acceptance and there's all these different things, and it's like uh part of that process I think is realizing like you're not alone.
Yes.
And I think one of the people that stands out to me was like Ryan Reynolds. I was like, this guy's in the limelight all day long. And I'm a big fan of a lot of his work. He's got, looks like a great family. And so like literally you type it up and it's like boom, article, 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 and you're like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
this guy's way more in the light than I'll probably ever be. And he's talking about it out loud. And it just immediately gives you the reassurance, like, okay, he's not alone. I can do this. And then that's where it's like, okay, taking these baby steps and figuring out what did he do. I think he used Headspace. So then kind of starting there. And so a lot of it's like self-diagnosing if you don't have access to, maybe a public therapist, or again, if you don't feel like you're even to that extent yet. It's just like taking these baby steps to feel like what works and what feels good. And so that's kind of what made me again reach out, was because it was kind of like my parts of this process was figuring out I'm not alone, figuring out there's other people that are probably more closer to me than Ryan Reynolds that I can talk to.
Mm.
And that's where, of course, Mr. Walsh came top of mind.
I think it's kind of crazy too, like that we might like a celebrity, or like maybe I look like an athlete or something and I realize that they also have this same thing, and you weigh that in comparison to yours, or you look at it and you go, wow, if they're dealing with it,
Yeah,
I that's it almost makes you feel better, and it's sad. I don't know if that's sad or if that's good. Just I think it's a good thing, because then we're
yeah,
not alone. Like, hey, I'm not the only one who might have these thoughts, or I'm not the only one who has this feeling. So I think step one really is like kind of recognition of like, hey, maybe I do have some forms of anxiety, and I need to find someone close to me, or
yeah,
find a new circle, or someone who can support me or encourage me, or maybe if I open up and share about this, someone I would have never assumed or thought of will reach out to me and also say, hey, me
totally,
too, me too. And
totally.
who better to learn from than someone who's walked the walk?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
I think we even started today. I think another thing too that really, in our world right now, social media and the war and COVID and gas prices, I mean, it's all over.
Dude. Yeah.
And our environment in the news, they make money. They know off negative stuff like with fear. And if we're seeking out news and all that stuff, that's not going to make you feel very good. I mean, 10 minutes
Hmm.
of looking at news, they've actually done studies and tested blood and seen like stress and cortisol go up just from 10 minutes of reading or watching news. So I
It's
think,
terrible.
and one thing I started really trying to do is get in silence more. So, I mean, obviously that's great for
Hmm.
morning routine, but the best example I can give, the time where I can feel the ultimate silence, is we got this pool and I'll hop in it, and it's so cold. I hop in the pool, and when I'm underwater, you can't hear
Mm.
anything. It is so quiet. And
Well
that
done.
quietness is so weird, because all day we're stimulated. We got TV, we got music playing in the background, we got podcast, we're talking to people. So it's
Hmm.
so rare to just get pockets of
Yeah.
silence to like
Yeah.
hear and think.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Andy?
Well,
You're
well,
on
no,
something.
I just think, I mean, like, I wish I had the pool. I'll tell you that. No, I'm just saying. I think that's why people have so many thoughts in the shower. Like it's the same. It's like the same thing,
True.
right? Um, and and you also mentioned too, just in terms of the news, it's like when you think about what's making you anxious, once you identify that, I think what's really important is to find the relativity to other things going on in the world. Like,
Mm,
when you think about what I'm stressed about, there are a lot of other people that have a lot bigger issues.
yeah.
And when you start to realize, like, why am I worried about this meeting I have in 60 minutes? Or why am I worried about, this upcoming event or this expense or whatever? It's like there are so many bigger problems going on in the world that people have to actually deal with, no matter how good of a person or bad they are. And it's like, it's when you start to realize like how small what you're worried about is, you already naturally feel better. I think you're kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, one thing I'll share too that I think is like the best medicine that people don't like hearing about because it's not immediate is just like time. Like
Yeah.
everything gets so much better with time. Like when you and I spoke, I think that was in January, maybe February.
Yeah. Yeah. 2-ish months
And
ago. Yeah.
it's already like I already feel a million times better. Right. And it's not like I didn't try and do other things to address it, right? Like, and we can touch on that too, but it's like just I think as time goes on, other things happen, like bigger things happen, happier things happen, sadder things happen, like life just happens. And I think we've just, you think about even like all these other things in the past, like high school breakups that used to feel like your world was collapsing. It's like,
Yeah.
what are we even talking about? Like, like you hardly even talk to these people anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just because the cure really is time. And that's why they say time heals all. And
Yeah.
so I think for people that feel like they can't see tomorrow or like the, better days ahead, it's like they're coming. Like it's all, it's just a roller coaster. Like, you can never have your greatest days all the time. You have to come back down, and that's why they become your greatest days of all time. And so, like, I think when you just start, like, one of the biggest things, of course, that comes with that is just like self-realization. And when you find yourself in these scenarios, and it's usually like at night once the craziness is dying down
Yep.
and you start to have those thoughts creep on, it's like you just need to recognize it and be like, okay, I've been here before. I've done this dance. Like let's go through some of the things that have worked. Let's text Andrew. Let's turn on Headspace. Let's go Google something else. Let's watch a favorite show. Let's turn on some like gentle music. Like whatever
Mm.
you got to do, you'll figure out like what your solution is. And then that day, next you're down one day, and that better day is one step closer. Yeah,
Progress, not perfection. I
yes,
think
sir.
you gotta, with anxiety too, I feel like you gotta set a little bit of a goal for yourself. Like, I wanna, like, let's say for example, we got 24 hours in a day and you have
Yeah,
an anxious feeling 1 hour of every day. So you have it
yeah,
20, like, let's say 12 times a day. Hey, by this time next month, I want to only have, 4 of those a day.
yeah,
Or like coming up with
yeah.
something to give you like progress. And I'm going to get a little biblical right now because in the Bible, it does say God gives you your cup of grace for the day. Like, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has its own worries. Focus on today. God has given you all the grace that you need for today. So
Mhm.
I want people to visualize this. I don't know if anybody has seen like those new Hydro flasks, the clear ones, and they have on them like the hour, like how, like 12, 1 o'clock, 2. You should have drank in this much by this time, like those kind of
I
Hydro
need one of
flasks.
those. Yeah.
So I think that is a great symbolism of your cup of grace. It's like your whole day, and that all that water that you're drinking is going to give you all that you need to survive that day. Yes, you may have some anxious thoughts. They
Hmm.
may come, but even just to quote Robin Sharma, I can't even take credit for this. This is from his book Everyday Hero
Lay it on me.
Manifesto.
Lay it on me.
So this is an amazing story. So it's this monk and he's got like spiritual disciples who want to learn from him. He's like this amazing monk. He's like, come into this like beautiful botanical garden with me and I'll teach you some great things. So he opens the gate and everyone kind of files in. He closes the gate and they start walking into this garden. And then all of a sudden, from across the garden, they see these three mangy, mean dogs sprinting right towards them. And half the group freezes. The other group is like panicking, trying to run back out the door. And the spiritual monk charges straight towards those three wild dogs. He runs right at them, right? And he's shaking his fist. He's getting mad. He even takes a breath, yawns, and they're still coming at him super hard. And he starts charging back at those three wild dogs. Right when it looks like they're about to meet, the dogs, all three stop and they flee because they're like, oh my gosh, this guy is freaking crazy. I think a lot of times our fears come at us, and when we run, they keep chasing us. Whereas if we buckle down and we come right back at them and we fight and we say no, like, and we realize like, I got some gumption, I got some dog in me, like those fears are like, ooh, I don't want to mess with this guy, he's crazy, like come at him, you know?
Yeah. Well, and those fears too are things that like you create, right? So I think again, when you realize it's like those dogs in this, this metaphor, like those are your dogs,
Yeah.
So you can make them up to be behemoths like Beowulfs, or you can make them being like little pugs, right? And I think and that's like, it's because it's really your imagination, right? Like
Yeah.
all those things are things that you've created and you've put them in your mind as like the certain size and capacity that they are.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too is like, even in that, if you were to think of it as like a dream, it's like those dogs are kind of blurry, it's like you just know they're there and it's like scary. But when
Yeah.
you actually like stop and focus and like look at what they actually are, and you start to like say, okay, well, wait a minute, like, it's like a nice looking dog. It's actually like a black lab, it looked like a big black wolf, but it's actually like a nice little lab, and it's actually panting and like it has a ball in its mouth and wants to hang out. I think what I'm saying is like, when you think about these things that freak you out, when you actually again start to identify and realize what they are,
Yeah.
I think an example is like, tax season for me, like this was a big one because I tried, so many different ventures and so many different things where I was like, oh my God, like taxes are going to freak me out. Like this is not like your typical TurboTax form fill out. Like this is like, like I got to do a whole bunch of different things that it's just like, it's new for me. And I kept being so like overwhelmed by the thought of it that I never got it done. And it just kept staying on my back. But when I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is freaking giving me anxiety. What can I do to get started and to like slowly break this thing down? And then that's where it's like, okay, I'm going to map out everything that I need to include in my tax form. Right. And all these different forms I need to start compiling. It's like when you start shaving it down and putting that fear into tasks that you can actually start tackling, it's like, this isn't that scary.
Yeah.
And then again, it's kind of like that thing where like you slowly make those progress. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Same thing with like a wedding and like all the things that go into it. Now, granted, to Noelle, she's the all-star here. Like she's super task oriented, and I can't, admire her enough for it, because it totally just breaks down the walls of like this. Oh my God, like this wedding is massive. So many people are coming. It's expensive. Like all these different things need to happen, all the way down to like the freaking napkins.
Yeah.
And it's like, she has a massive spreadsheet, and it's because she's got all these different tasks and everything that's set up. And, I think that's just, again, kind of using your metaphor of the dogs. It's like, those dogs are what you make it. And once you identify what the dogs really are, then you can actually like figure out how, to break them in, right? Kind of like a wild horse. And I think that's what's really helped me as well.
Yeah, I think like taking action too, how you shared it. I think even you had mentioned you kind of like will rationalize, maybe you have an anxious thought. Like even for me, I know tax, I'm like, I owe so much money in taxes. It's like, whoo, I am an adult, like, man, it's great to make money, but man, when tax season comes around, boy, wow. I thought a punch to the gut hurt. This hurts my mind a lot more. So I feel you, but I think like you had mentioned, like rationalizing, maybe writing out, hey, what is this thought right now? Do I have to accept this as truth? No, not necessarily. And you had mentioned one thing I thought was great is maybe even comparing that to other circumstances, like, hey, well, at least I don't have this, or at least I don't have this, or using your past, like, hey, remember when I went through that and that thing was crazy and I thought my ship was about to cave in, but I came out of that. This is pales in comparison to this. Like, I know I have this, and I'm a big believer in God. Like, he will never give you anything you can't handle. And sometimes maybe we are in a season when we are dealing with anxiety or stress. We need to grow and we need to take new action and develop new habits that will help us later down the road. So we do have to go through a little bit of a storm or a tough season, because that's where we grow. And I love like the Bible too, because every morning, Jem and I talk about this, like, things will come at you, right? So in the Bible, it talks about putting on the armor of God. So you put on your shoes of peace, your belt of truth, your breastplate of righteousness, helmet of salvation, sword of the Spirit, and you hold up your shield of faith all day. And I pray that prayer over us. And like, I just know I'm unpenetrable. I have all of God's armor. And the best part about the Bible too is all the armor is in the front. There's nothing on the back. It doesn't say like your back plate or, none of that, because you're supposed to always be charging straight ahead, and I think, Andy, to your point, taking action, like digestible steps, like, hey, I may not figure out all my taxes today, but I can call a tax professional, get a meeting booked. Tomorrow I can figure out what my S corp is looking like the next, and then you take these little bite-sized chunks and you start realizing, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm able to do this,
Yeah. And it's a funny example, right? Like talking taxes, like, again, it's one of those
tax
things
season,
where
so it is right on point, bro.
good timing. It's probably good timing. But it's just funny, and a side note, I still think it's ridiculous that we have to figure out what we owe, and if we get it wrong, then we get in trouble. It's like, just tell me, you already know what I owe. Just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
And and that's, I think it's just an interesting process still.
We gotta get you a bookkeeper, bro.
I found one. Well, see, that's part of the process. I found a professional because I'm not a pro, and so like that's just, again, that's part of it. Like, then again, now you have. I think it's something that I'm realizing. Like, my dad does a really good job of. It's like, he's smart. He knows a lot of things. He knows how to get stuff done, but there are certain things that he just leans on professionals for, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a reason that they have a rate, because, like, not only is it their expertise, but it's like the value of their time that then gives you the peace of mind, which is really hard to put an ROI on. But, like, all that, just like, you got to know, when to not only reach out to friends, but also just like to professionals.
Delegate. And I think that money is worth it. I mean, I think sometimes we get afraid, like, do I want to pay $165 a month for a bookkeeper? Is that worth it? That's more than my gym membership. But the peace of mind of, like, all I have to do is scan a receipt from QuickBooks and I get my P&L statements at the end of every month, and I have perfect, easy taxes. Dude, that $165 is the best night of sleep I've ever got,
Or how much would you pay not to get audited?
Right?
But yeah, I again, in the grand scheme of things, like, tax season was like the first example that came to mind. But it's like, I think there's just so many things that can be tangible or itemized in the sense of, like, anxiety as a whole, right? Like, I started to get anxious this afternoon because since I got back from Iceland, it's like my calendar has literally been nuts for 16-hour days. I was up at like 4:30 on Walsh time because of the time zone, but like, I've been busy ever since. And I know that this has happened before. So as soon as we get off this call and I've got a break in the action, like, I'm just going to write down my to-do list, which I know that you usually do a good job of in the mornings. For me, it's like, I also need to do it in the afternoon, because I think part of my anxiety can stem from just the fear of things falling through the cracks. And I think that's another thing. Like, when we're laying down in bed at night, one thing, I don't remember where I read it. It might've been like even LinkedIn, but I know some people have like a notebook by their bedstand. My phone's still there. I'm trying to get rid of that. But I found that, people say when you lay down at bed at night, you have so many thoughts that surface to the top of your mind. And it's like that quiet time, whether you're in the shower or in bed, and then all of a sudden you can't sleep.
Yeah.
And I've realized it's because you have so many things racing where you're like, oh shit, I still have to do this. And oh shoot, I still got to do that. And I forgot about this. And I have this due in 2 days. And so like you're trying to keep everything to the surface before you fall asleep so you don't forget about it. Naturally, you forget about half of it in the morning. So I've
Yeah.
found that if I actually do have my mind racing at night, I get over to my phone, I open the notes, I put it into checklist mode, and I write down everything that's top of mind. And
Yes.
then I say like, I go out instead of counting sheep, I just say everything that I'm thankful for to really again put everything into perspective with how fortunate I am. And then I'm out like a light. Right.
Dude,
And then you wake up and your task list is ready to go.
that is amazing advice. And I think like this is a good spot really to end on, like, because I agree
Yeah.
with you. And it's so crazy hearing you, Andy, because I actually remember times when I would lay down and all these thoughts would flood and I lay down and I fall asleep in seconds. It has
Right.
been like that for
Yeah.
years. Like, and I
Because you
used
know what
to
you got. Yeah.
it used to be so crazy. And so that's what I want to, anybody who's listening, it's obtainable because for me personally, I lay down and I'm out like a light. I don't have any thoughts. And I think three things that have honestly helped me is in my notes section of my phone, I have a to-do list for real estate. I have a to-do list for personal and I have a to-do list for groceries. And they're all in one thing. So I can just put in here, this is
Sure.
something personal I need to do, this is something work related I need to do, and like groceries or like date night stuff with Gemma, so I
Mm-hmm.
have that to-do list so you never forget anything. Meditation too, because that is proactively going and getting silence. Like shower, we usually have to do those, so we might be pressed for time. You have to create at least little 10 or 15-minute windows to get quiet at
Mm-hmm.
least once a day, because this will give you that opportunity, not when you're laying in bed, to run through thoughts, turn them into positive ones. And the last one is an end of the day walk. I walk
Mm-hmm.
so much, and especially with Gemma, we are like so big on walking right now. We'll walk every day after work. You declutter the day, you talk it out, and it's so fun too. Like, because after you've talked about your day, and if you're walking with a friend or a significant other, there's no like TV, there's no food, there's nothing to distract. You're just walking and you have to get back to your destination. So you'll start talking about stuff that was in you you didn't even know was in you. So I think
Yeah.
like a solid end of the day 30, 45-minute walk, it relaxes you, you get sunshine, or you get outside, you get fresh air, and you talk. I do it with a friend or a partner to say, hey, you want to go for a 30-minute walk, and you'll find a
Yeah.
great spot. I think those are
Yeah.
some tips that would help. What do you think?
100%. Especially with how many, with working from home becoming more and more prominent. It's like I found myself attached to my desk, from like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and haven't gone outside once. And fortunately, I do have the dog to force me to do that sometimes. But it's like if I didn't, I would never see light of day. And I
Wow.
think it's so important to get that fresh air. I agree with you. I think even if you don't have a partner or someone to go with, it's like I think it's almost like walking meditation where, and I think there's actually even like certain types of things on Headspace and things like that where, they'll walk you through a walking meditation just so you can even just get outside and just listen to like what's around you and breathe and think. It's just, it's an incredible exercise. And yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head.
Dude, I'm so addicted to walking. I've actually started doing one walk in the afternoon, like before my meeting. So after I eat lunch, I'll take a walk around the neighborhood, get some sunlight. I'll get quiet, listen to the birds and bees. I'll go and smell
Money.
flowers. I think for me, sometimes you look at all these elite performers and people are like, grind, work hard, work 8 hours. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to work less hours. So when I do work, I'm incredibly productive, but enjoy the day. Like I'm
Yeah.
dancing in my car. People are like, this guy's crazy. I don't care. And you complimenting people all day. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
huge too. Is like sometimes when you're really low or you feel very anxious or anything, put good energy into others, compliment somebody. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
needs a compliment. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
any person you can pour love or encouragement into. I hope I don't cry. I'm going to share a last story here, but yesterday on my walk, there's the lady who's doing the crosswalk for the kids when they get out of school. And I just, in my heart, I felt say something to her. And I was just, next thing I know, I'm like, hey, what's up? Hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for volunteering to, help the kids get across the street safe. She's like, oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Like, we do get paid. I'm not volunteering. Like, it's okay. And I was like, anyways, people fly up and down the street. You have an incredibly important job. And I can't thank you enough for what you do. And she was like, that makes me feel so important. And thank you for saying that. See, I'm getting emotional. I'm like,
I love it.
But that lady needed that. Sometimes I think we can pour in like a little bit of love and encouragement to others. And it makes you feel, but I'm telling you, I had the best walk ever after that. I was like, let's go. Who's next? It's like little things like that. They give you the dopamine and the serotonin,
Yeah. That's one last thing I'd say too, is like, I remember being, feeling like I was so busy. Like I loved volunteering. I would help with the shelter here and there, but I was like, oh man, I'm so busy. I just can't do it. And it's like, that's just not the case. You mentioned we all have the same 24 hours. It is what you make it. And I started volunteering with like the local baseball team, which is right nearby at the high school. And it gets me outside, but it's like that sense of giving back and, kind of that each one teach one approach and just being a mentor. Like it's so selfish because it's so much more rewarding for me who's doing this for free, right, than it is for them that are getting the coaching and the mentorship. It's like, I think it's just so healthy. And it's another way to not necessarily distract yourself, but just feel like, you're giving back and you're doing good and you have a purpose. And I think that sense of community is just also incredibly helpful. So again, I've done it with dogs. I've done it with like sports. Like, you'll find your niche with where you love giving back, but I do advocate that anybody at least tries it. Like an hour a month is still like something. And I found it to be really, really helpful.
Andy, you are the man, brother. I know you're so busy. You got a million things to do, but for you to take time, I know this podcast, people will be able to listen back to this for years. I think this is going to just age really well and just be really great for so many people. Just recapping today, I think, identifying anxiety, reaching out to someone, talking about it, I think volunteering is great. And then taking little bits of action and also like getting either physical, a workout, breath work, headspace, taking a walk. I think these are, helpful strategies for anybody who tuned in today. There was a reason you were supposed to listen. So Andy, I thank you. So can people reach out to you if they want to talk? Where can they follow you on social media? What's a good way to get in touch?
Yeah. I'm on social media. Instagram is just andy.j.carlson. I've got a website too, actually, andyjcarlson.com. Wherever you want to catch me, always looking to chat. But yeah, appreciate you having me, Andrew. It's been a pleasure. I could talk to you for hours, if not days.
I know, right? We did great on time today, Andy. So thank you so much. And literally everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the Andrew Walsh podcast. I hope you took something away from Andy and I's conversation. We wish you a blessed day. Thank you, Andy. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and be a blessing to someone today. Take care.